Yes, we're live. Hello, welcome to Become the Change weekly web show. My name's Sandy Levesque, and really excited today actually because I have a special guest. You're in Virginia, Greg, is that right?
Close. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, which isn't that far
Oh,
from Virginia.
okay. I'm not sure why I had Virginia in my head, but Greg is the author of Why Quantum Physicists Do Not Fail. And I'm really excited. You might be able to tell by my slightly shiny face to have Greg on the show because I read your book. Well, it's actually just one of your books, but it was recommended to me by a good friend about 6 weeks ago. And it's one of those books that I've now read it 3 times. I've been applying the tools, and we're going to get into this in a second, that you share in the book. And it's really something that I think about it literally almost every single day because I'm applying some of the things that you share that you can do every week to start to make the law of attraction actually work. And I called this hangout the missing link in law of attraction because Greg is known as the law of attraction science guy. So do you just want to say hello, Greg, first of all?
Well, hello, Greg. Hi. Hello to everybody. Sandy, I appreciate you saying those kind things and sharing that praise and in your wonderful assessment. I am to be frank, I'm honored when people share such praise because I don't I don't come into your individual universe with any predetermined meaning and value except that which you decide to assign me. So when I hear you say that, it doesn't blow up my ego or make my head swell. It makes me feel gratitude that you've given me that opportunity. And hopefully today, people that are watching and listening will give me the same type of opportunity. And if that is afforded to me, I say thank you to you as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm just excited to have you on the show because, Greg is a best-selling author. He's written a series of books called Why Quantum Physicists Do Not, and then something, Get Fat or Fail, Why They Have Abundance. It's another one that I've read. And I can see from I've been looking through your blogs now and your videos and chatting to the friend who actually recommended your work to me, and you're touching a lot of people, and I think that is because you explain quantum physics and what we're going to be speaking about during this interview in a really clear way. I've watched films about quantum physics before. I've read about it. I've been thinking about it for several years now, and reading your book in particular really gave me a huge aha moment where the way that you described how science used to see the world and how we are increasingly seeing the world through quantum physics, it really made it so clear to me personally, and was so inspiring that I literally I couldn't do my work that day. I just had to read the book in one sitting.
Wow.
And yeah. And hi also just to some of our viewers, Sajjad saying hello. I've put the Q&A on, so you guys watching, if you have any questions you want me to ask Greg, then please feel free to leave them in the Q&A section. And if that's okay with you, Greg, we'll take some improvised questions as well.
They're all improvised questions because you haven't shared any with me ahead of time. So
Exactly.
stump me. Just
I
throw
know.
me all the hard questions you can think of and see. And by the way, Sandy, I apologize to you for inhibiting your productivity that day. Uh, for anybody who hasn't read the books, if you have the same experience, email me and I'll PayPal you, $10 or something to make up for the lost productivity. I
Yeah.
I can't promise you will not be swept away. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, my to-do list wasn't very happy that day, but it's okay. I actually don't really have a to-do list, but I have a it's
I
okay.
have a to-be list. I'm
Yeah,
sure
right.
you can relate to that.
Yeah, well, exactly. Especially after when you start to apply all the principles in the book, that makes a lot more sense than having a to-do list. But anyway, we'll get into that.
Sure.
So what people can expect to get out of today's interview. Basically, I would love to know, Greg, what results you've had from applying what you write about in your work, in your book, the architecture paradigm that you refer to and that you've kind of given the name to it. What changes have you seen in your own life after you started applying what you decided to write about? So I think I've read the book, so I already know. But I would love for people who don't know you because they haven't read the book yet, or this is the first time they've heard of the book. I'd love it if you could just give them a sense of the benefits they'll get from actually really taking this in and listening to what you're about to share.
Sure.
What changes have you seen since you started to live more like this?
Absolutely. Sandy, I don't know if I'm an anomaly. I suspect that I'm not. A good portion of my adult life, I felt vaguely unfulfilled, and I guess the best way I could describe it is as I got into my mid-30s, although I had achieved a lot of things that I felt would give me that feeling of fulfillment that I desired, it remained elusive. And for me, happiness is I think seeking happiness is probably, for me, a cliche because I'm not always happy. However, I can feel fulfilled even when I'm experiencing moments of emotions and experiences that I wouldn't necessarily classify as happy. Well, I really became disenchanted with the way my life was unfolding because there seemed to be these really important goals that remained just out of my reach, and I really got tired of being sick and tired, and I decided to just go for it, and I utilized positive thought and positive affirmation to back up my efforts, and I got to tell you that led me to a place where I was $1 million in debt and declaring bankruptcy, and my wife was leaving me, and I really felt very suicidal. I mean, it was just the worst period of my life, and I was completely enraged with self-help, positive thought, any notion that we could utilize assistance to help create experiences that were more aligned with our desires. And what really led me to seek the answers that I now write about was simply a desperation of not having anywhere else to turn. I had reached a point where I thought, well, what do I have to lose? And if I tried, a friend of mine had given me the book, The Secret, and I was really turned off by the idea of it, but I happened to have some free time on my hands one day, and I read it because, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. Nothing else has been working. I'm about ready to go over Niagara Falls, and I read it, and I thought, you know what, I'm about 6 months away from this financial Armageddon completely exploding and my entire life unraveling in ways that I could never put it back together. What's it going to hurt? So I had some reasonable familiarity with quantum physics, and a lot of what I was reading about the law of attraction reminded me of things that I had learned about quantum physics. And I thought, what if the two of them together could create a blueprint? Because I had a lot of unreserved trust in science, and the law of attraction certainly sounded appealing to me. Now, I knew that positive thought had led me astray, but positive thought didn't necessarily jibe with what I'd learned about the law of attraction. Now, Sandy, there was this. Have you ever eaten a Reese's peanut butter cup before?
Oh, I love them. Yeah.
Well, they're great, right? Well, I remember when I was a kid, there was a commercial that where two people were sort of walking along. One person was eating a chocolate bar, and the other person had a jar of peanut butter open, and they would run into each other, and the chocolate candy bar would get smushed into the jar of peanut butter, and they'd both get kind of annoyed, and then they'd taste it and go, "Oh, this is awesome." Well, that's kind of what happened with me and quantum physics and the law of attraction. And you know, I began to I will tell you that within a year, I didn't have any more debt. I never went bankrupt. I never had any foreclosures, and I actually had money in the bank. And I said, "Wow, you know, this is awesome. I have learned some things that now I've, you know, rescued myself. Now I can take these and apply them forward in a positive fashion, right?" Only it didn't work. And I thought, hold on a second. You know, this worked in crisis. There's got to be a way to make it work in a non-crisis situation. And so as I began, you know, kept tinkering with it and making it better and trying and continuing to read and learn, eventually I wound up creating something that I call Grow a Greater You, and it's a game. Okay, and that's the name of my latest book, my last book that was out last July, Grow a Greater You. I don't call it a game because it's trivial or, you know, in any way unimportant. I call it a game because it's incredibly fun. And the truth is that if no one ever purchased a book or came to my website from this day forward, I would continue to play Grow a Greater You every day for the rest of my life, just for today. Today, I woke up this morning and I got excited that I had the opportunity to play Grow a Greater You today. Then to wrap this up, because your question is the way my life has changed, I have far surpassed any desires that I held back in 2006 when all this kind of got started. Far surpassed. My life today is better than I would have dared to dream back then, and not just for personal material desires, but ways that I've been able to help people and influence positive change in my community, in the world. And every day I get the feeling that I'm the most blessed person on the earth, and my hope is that you feel the same way about yourself, and that everyone listening feels the same way about herself and himself. And you know what my greatest desire is today? It's that suffering becomes optional for every person on the planet. And I realize that's a fairly grandiose desire. I will tell you this: I don't have any shame today about saying I'm not playing small anymore. There is no reason for me to play small. We don't have to have certain outcomes to feel good about ourselves. We don't have to achieve certain things to feel good about ourselves. And we didn't come here to play small, and we don't have to anymore. So I hope, if that's inspiring to anyone who's in a place of pain or suffering right now, I promise you that there are answers, even to the things that have bedeviled you and beguiled you and teased you with their tantalizing promises remaining just out of your reach. You can do that. That's why people say, Greg can teach you how to manifest the big stuff. Just because there really are solutions, So
yeah,
that's a long answer.
Well, no, I love it. I love the fact that you had such a big change in a year, and that what you said about it then developing, because you realized that you thought that was it, that you had the solution, but then you had to then adapt it and evolve it to start applying it to other things, because you talk about in Why Quantum Physicists Do Not Fail about using the tools that you share, even with losing weight, not just coming out of debt or changing your life, but changing your body shape, like using the way that you think about the world to actually change physical stuff, you know, like
Hmm.
your gene size, as well as your bank account. And something that I want to pick up from what you said, Greg, is when people are feeling like there are things which are out of their reach, that are like dazzling them, but they can never quite get to them. You know, there's a passage in your book. Well, when I say that, I feel like I should be precise about which one. And just because someone actually asked if we could give an intro into the book, and I would just say to that question, this is in the Q&A, that this whole interview will give you will give you an understanding of what the book's about, because basically, in a nutshell, it's about how you can use the science of quantum physics to understand why the law of attraction works and to make the law of attraction work better. So we're going to get into more details about that. But just in case anyone wasn't completely clear what the book actually talks about, that, you know, would you say that's a fair assessment, Greg?
Absolutely. And I would insist, and I know I won't have to insist. I mean, of course, we'll talk about it, but absolutely, I definitely want to talk about some of the differentiators. I certainly wouldn't say that people should abandon the law of attraction or law of attraction books and law of attraction teachings. And in fact, you know, my books really, they are law of attraction books. Although, if people don't want to think of them that way, I think that's perfectly appropriate as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The way I see it is that it just explains the science behind it, because the way
Hmm.
I felt after reading it was I had always intuitively understood that the law of attraction worked. Like, I could just feel that it made sense, you know, it just felt good in my gut.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't quite understand it, you know. I knew that we're all connected. I know that when you look at things in a certain way, it affects how those things are. But the way that you explained it in your book, you know, the way that science used to see the world and how that's created the way most of us see the world, why there is so much
Right.
suffering. You know, like you said, one of the things you'd like to see is for suffering to be optional. And that's funny because you must be a bit psychic, Greg. You basically answered one of my final questions.
I wanted,
I'll tell you.
wanted to make sure, you know, that we got that cleared up ahead of time.
End world suffering. But I hear you, because that's something, you know, this I call this web show Become the Change, because I
Hmm.
don't know if you know anything about my background, Greg, but I used to actually be an anti-poverty campaigner and an
Uh,
anti-sexism campaigner, and I used to study and protest about the suffering around us. And it wasn't until I got very ill that I realized that wasn't actually really helping, and that by focusing on solutions, that could be more of a help. So I'm just really grateful to be talking to you, because, you know, I think the work that you're doing with your books, with sharing it, because you don't just write books, you're very active on social media, you do hangouts like the one we're doing today. You're really getting your ideas out there. I think that's really important.
well, thank
And
you.
yeah.
You're helping me. Thank you. What are you talking about? You're the one getting my ideas out there, not me.
Yeah, but you could have
So
said,
pat yourself
oh,
on the back. Thank you very much.
yeah, oh, well, yeah. And what I wanted to ask you was, one of the things that really touched me when I was reading the book was you speak about how people feel when they're applying the law of attraction and nothing's working. And the
Hmm.
analogy you used, it spoke to me so much, because I've really felt like that in the past. You spoke about like a little fish that wants to become a deep sea diver and is
Hmm.
buying all these courses to learn how to dive better to the bottom of the ocean, and does all the exercises and does everything that she's told to do, and yet she can never dive. And she keeps trying, and then she tries like course after course, and after 2 or 3 years, her self-confidence has completely crashed, because she still can't deep sea dive, and she doesn't understand why. And she thinks that maybe it's all a lie, and that people don't really deep sea dive, and that it's just not true. And then she realizes, or you share, that she's basically doing all of this in this tiny fish tank, and that actually, if she came out of the fish tank, she would be able to deep sea dive. And I wanted to ask you, could you explain why you think so many people do feel like that? You know, why do so many people read The Secret or study the law of attraction and yet feel like they get excited for a few days, but then, you know, a few months down the road, nothing much has changed in their life? Like, what do you think is the main thing that holds people back that they can change?
I I think that's a great question, and I really the I think the toughest or the biggest opportunity, the greatest challenge is how compelling the illusion of our senses is. One thing to realize is that the paradigms of how the world works, certainly the Western world works, if not now because of the ability to exchange information so rapidly and so instantaneously, perhaps the whole world. The reasons we do things the way we do them, the reasons, the ways that we understand how we operate in this world, they're all based on what our senses tell us. Even the science that is really the source of those paradigms, or the source of the reasons we do things the way we do them, is the science of the eyeballs and the ears and the basic senses. The term is Newtonian physics, and I don't want to turn anyone off by turning this into a science lesson, but to say that the first scientific revolution, if you're familiar with things like the law of thermodynamics and, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, those types of scientific laws that were discovered during the Newtonian era, they described how the world works perfectly. They really did. Only it was the world they were describing is the world that we see with and experience with our senses. And it works. I mean, that type of physics has allowed us to create airplanes and spaceships and modern medicine and, governments and organizations. It's really created the Western world. What has happened, though, is that we realize that while Newtonian physics is perfectly describing the world that we experience with our senses, it's not describing the underlying world, the way the universe really works on an energy level. And quantum physics doesn't invalidate the old physics. It's definitely more accurate than the old physics. It's more reliable than the old physics. But what it does is it gives us some different ways that are much more accurate and reliable and effective of basing the reasons we do things the way we do them upon. You see, when I spoke of that illusion of our senses, it is really difficult for us to remember that the material world that we experience is not predetermined. It doesn't await us in a predetermined state. It doesn't await our discovery in a predetermined meaning and value. The old science of our senses and what we're prone to think, when we use our senses to base our decisions on, is that we are inconsequential bystanders. That, gosh, this is just how governments are. This is just how my wife is. This is just how my boss is. This is just how money is. We say money's hard and you have to work hard to get it. And usually, people have to take advantage of other people to get it. Things like that. Or we say marriage is hard. Or we say, it's hard to affect change in the world. Or all of these things that they make perfect sense when we're just using our eyeballs. So we say, well, okay, the law of attraction says we have some influence. All right, that sounds great. And intuitively, I can feel that. I mean, I have had a sense of that in my life. So I start thinking about things like, well, I'd like to see a butterfly, or I'd like to see, a certain automobile on the road. And we can experience those manifestations rather easily. However, well, often, because those aren't real stretches for us, where the disconnect comes for most people, and certainly did for me, I don't really want, I love seeing a butterfly. That's beautiful, and it can be very meaningful. However, what I really want is a relationship with a soulmate. What I really want is financial abundance. What I really want is a fulfilling career. What I really want is to not have to, be concerned about whether my bills will be paid. I want a body that's healthy and fit and I feel good about. Those are the things I really want. And those are the things that our eyeball world will often, I don't want to say prevent us from achieving, but certainly give us some reasonably insurmountable obstacles to achieving, because the paradigms, think about how a traditional how-to book is written. If I'm a traditional how-to author, let's say I achieve, a great looking body, right? So I'm going to write a how-to book, and here's the how-to book. Here's what I used to, look like and feel like. Here's what I did. Now, you copy that, and you'll get what I got. Well, that can work if I happen to have beliefs that are aligned with those outcomes, just like the author of the book had. Now, whether the author of the book realizes that she had beliefs that were aligned with those outcomes or not, it doesn't matter how wonderful those instructions are that she wrote down. If my beliefs are not aligned with those desired outcomes, the best instructions in the world won't mean a hill of beans. And so, as you illustrated, ultimately, when I quote-unquote fail, what's really happening is my beliefs are not aligned with those desired outcomes. And yet, when I don't understand that, when I'm using my, my eyeballs to tell me how the world works, I'm only left with two conclusions. Either I'm bad and wrong, or I'm being victimized, right? And neither one of those two feels good at all. In fact, the I'm bad part, well, that feels horrible. So a lot of us tend to drift over to the, well, it must be, it must be that the deck's stacked against me. It must be that only lucky people get it, or it must be that people are denying me. And I mean, even think about the fact that what we've got in that paradigm is we're looking to an outside source, something outside of us that can say, yes, Greg, you can have it, or no, Greg, you can't have it. Well, that type of way of life, that type of paradigm, that type of reasons I do things the way I do them, that makes perfect sense to my eyes, to my basic senses. But quantum physics reveals a different world that is not one that we experience with our eyes, and actually offers us some really incredibly effective ways to make, as you know, because you've read the books, some of the changes really are not dramatic. They're not necessarily going to turn you into the village kook in any way, or even sound strange in a lot of ways. So maybe we can talk about some of those things.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Wow, there's so many points from what you just said I want to pick out. Like, okay, I'm gonna have to remember them all. And I would love to, because I think I love the way you describe it as eyeball science, because I think that's a really clear way of understanding the difference between, if people are struggling to see results, that understanding that's because they are probably over relying on what they can see, hear, touch, the senses. I would love if you could speak about the scientific experiment which first started to make people question that eyeball science. Why did people start looking beyond what you just described? The science that helped us to build planes and bridges and things like that. Why did people start questioning that and thinking, well, that can't be all because this happened?
Eyeball science, Newtonian physics, it described everything so perfectly that science students in the 19th century were advised, don't go into physics because all the work's been done. Go somewhere else. And that was a correct assessment at the time, until the early 20th century. Two scientists named Michelson and Morley decided to find out how fast the Earth was traveling as it made its trip around the sun. Now, we knew the speed of light, so all they had to do was develop an instrument that would, measure the length of time that it took light to travel from the sun to the Earth every single day, and over the course of a calendar year, all they would have to do is plug in the data, and it would give them a mile per hour reading. Well, they got done. 365 days passed, and they put all the data in, and what they came up with was the Earth was traveling 0 miles per hour. Now, of course, that's not correct, and they know that, and everyone knows that. Well, that's kind of scary, definitely unsettling, but what scientists do when they run into something like that, they don't run away. They say, wait a minute, we're going to have to come up with some science. We're going to have to come up with some math that can help us describe what's going on here. So going back to the drawing board, we think we have it all figured out. Wow, we have to go back to the drawing board. And what scientists continue to discover today is that there is an energy world that is, and we talk about teeny tiny, the infinitesimally small, that Newtonian physics doesn't describe. And that the science and the math that was developed to describe that world came to be known as quantum physics. And I just want to say this too, when you talk about the eyeball science and then the quantum science, most of the time we will never experience the quantum world with our eyeballs, most of the time. And I want to give people this metaphor. If you walk out of your front door, as soon as this hangout's over, don't do it right now, please. Walk out into your front lawn and see the world as a globe, right from where you're standing. And unless I hear that there are some points on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro where you are supposed to be able to see some curvature. Now, I've never been there myself, but unless you're on top of Mount Kilimanjaro right now, you will walk out into your front yard and you will not experience the world as a globe. You will experience it as a flat plane. And yet, we all know that the world is a sphere. And the only reason that we're not experiencing it as a sphere has to do with perspective. We are too small compared to the larger object to experience the sphere. But we still know it's a sphere, and we still operate our lives as if it's a sphere, because we know it's a sphere. We don't care what our eyeballs tell us. We don't make plans as if the Earth is a big flat table. We make plans that say the Earth is a globe. I don't care if I never see that it's a globe. Most of us aren't going into outer space, Sandy. Well, at least for a while. But we're still going to base our lives around the idea that the Earth is a globe. Well, flip that. And now you've got a good blueprint for how we can utilize new paradigms from quantum physics. We may never experience the quantum laws and principles upon which this blueprint is based. But when we act on those principles, when we create ways of doing things based on those principles, we'll find out how effective they are. So that's a really cool thing,
Yeah, I just love that analogy. That just gave me an aha moment, just to see it in a different way like that. because I think that that can be something that holds people back, is that, especially if you've grown up not really been being very exposed to these kinds of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and you tend to believe that what you see is what you get. You know, there's even a cliche saying, isn't there? And I think you actually
Right.
mentioned it in your book, when actually it's, you know, what you believe is what you get. It's the other way around.
Right,
Uh,
right, right, definitely.
yeah, and I'd love to know. You mentioned earlier that when people don't really understand this, they can find themselves continually working towards something, but and doing what someone else has told them to do that worked for them. You know, going back to that example of somebody writing a book about some kind of diet or something that they've done. But if their beliefs aren't in alignment with that thing, then no matter how hard they try, how perfectly they do the exercises, they won't ever get there because their
Mm-hmm.
beliefs are going in one direction and that target is in another. How can people use the principles of quantum physics to get their beliefs back on track?
Well, all you have to do is buy all my books. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. uh,
But you can
it,
do that.
well, the for me, and by the way, I just want to say I am absolutely an active practitioner of what I teach. I am not sitting on some mountaintop dispensing knowledge to the masses as the enlightened master. Now, I like to think of myself as enlightened and even a master, but perhaps not any more so than any other human being. I would hope everyone would feel the same way about herself and himself. I am living this, and my understanding and my ability to utilize these things in my life continue to grow. And of course, teaching it is a great way to facilitate that. So please understand that when I talk about these things, I'm talking about how I live today. And the simplest way that I would explain it today is that here is the power that humans have. Uh, Anybody who's watching this hangout, anybody who's listening to this hangout, is seeing some sort, whether they're hearing my voice and they're seeing my face and they're looking at the things behind me and creating they have some sort of evaluation, of me, whether it's, oh, this guy looks like, an a-hole, or this guy looks like the greatest guy I ever met, or something in between, right? And we all know that. We're all familiar with the notion that, we see things and we have impressions. We tend to think of that, however, in a rather superficial way, meaning, yeah, that's just how life is. We have opinions, we have preferences, that sort of thing. What I want to say is that the impression that you created of me, Sandy, and anyone else who's looking at me and observing me and experiencing me, you created me in your individual universe. You created a version of me in your individual universe that is real. Okay? I have a version of myself in my individual universe, and there are things that I do to help people create good versions of me and helpful versions of me and valuable versions of me. However, it's always going to be your decision, your choice regarding what version of me you want to create. Okay? And that applies to every single material experience we have. You see, Sandy, the fan that you have, the Japanese fan in the background,
Yeah.
you didn't literally create that when you first saw it and decided that it would be a very interesting and beautiful decoration in your home. You saw it and you said, oh, look at that. I would like to display that. You didn't literally create that fan when you came upon it. It was already there because other people had created it. However, you did create your own unique version of that fan in your own unique universe. And the version of the fan that you created is 100% real in your individual universe. Now, it might sound kind of silly when we talk about something like a fan that's on someone's wall as a decoration. Well, gosh, who cares what version of that fan I create? And I will add that when you and I and anyone else look at that fan, our material experience of that fan is going to be very, very similar. I don't see a purple fan. I see a white fan, just like you do. The meaning and the value of the fan, though, will be entirely, completely nothing but individual. Now, with a fan, does it really matter what the my meaning and value of the fan is? Come on, that's kind of boring, However, though, well, let's start talking about things like money and other people, like our partner. Now, wait a minute. The version of my partner I'm creating, now we're starting to talk about something pretty substantial, right? And the same things I just described apply 100%, no exceptions, to how I'm creating my individual version of my partner and my job and my money and my salary and my body and my health and my car, my children, my relationships, everything. It applies to everything. And then here's what I would say. Every single human being, by the way, a human being is a time-space event. That's a quantum term for having the quantum field collapse all its possibilities and become one definitive concrete object. Okay, so a human being is a time-space event, just like a table and a mouse pad and a penny. But a human being is very special. We have something called a consciousness, right? Human beings are consciousness-possessing time-space events. Now, my wife, nothing melts my wife's heart better than when I say, honey, you are my favorite consciousness-possessing time-space event. That's when she looks at me and says, hey, weirdo, can we just use regular language? Every single human being is creating her own individual universe by creating her own individual version of every single thing every second of her life. It's what she started doing when she was born. It's what she will do until the day she dies, if she dies. So far, everyone else has died. We don't know for sure that we'll die, but so far everyone else has. But the reason I say that is because you can't stop the process I just described. You can't opt out. You're doing it every single second. So the only choice that humans have regarding that type of creation is this. Do you want to do it unintentionally, or do you want to do it intentionally? But that's your only choice. My proposition is, you know what? If I'm doing it every second, why wouldn't I want to do it intentionally? I mean, what is holding me back from wanting to do it intentionally? And that's what I would say. We can do it intentionally. Now, our ability to do it intentionally, yeah, it's going to grow with practice. It's just like everything else. Sandy, you're really good at. Are you? Did I remember reading that you do yoga? Is that right?
I teach dance and
okay.
Stretches in yoga.
That's right. Dance, exercise and movement and that sort of thing. And you're really good at it. The ability you have today to teach that and be that, you didn't just jump the very first time you ever did it. You didn't exhibit that ability, right? Well, intentionally creating a version of the universe that pleases us because it's aligned with our desired outcomes. Oh boy, can you become a master at that? I promise you, you can. It just takes practice. It takes effort. And the cool thing is that it's fun. It is so fun because right from day one, it's better. You know, right from day one, it's better. So to me, this is exactly the game. I have learned. This is what I came here to do. This is the game I came here to play. I think it's the game we all came here to play. And you may not call it Grow a Greater You, and you may do things a little differently, or you may read my books and do it exactly, in the way I describe. But it's the game we came here to play. It's the game of growing into our greatest visions for ourselves, our greatest version of us, of leaving behind limitations, of leaving behind playing small out of fear that I'm not worthy and that I don't deserve it and I'm not good enough. And ultimately, I've discovered that's what fulfillment is about. It's not about achieving something. It's about allowing myself permission to be in bloom, There's not a certain finish line that we have to reach, right? Sandy doesn't have to achieve a certain amount of money in her bank account and a marriage that lasts a certain length of time and a certain number of Twitter followers. Well, no, maybe you do need to achieve a certain number of Twitter followers. No, there's no achievement that Sandy has to reach that says, oh, now you're good. Now you're okay. Now you can love yourself, right? This journey, even when we haven't grown our beliefs into the full manifestation of some of our long-standing desires, this journey puts us in a place where we say, yeah, you know what? I'm here to be okay, to say I'm okay. I love myself. I love being a human being. I love being alive. Sandy, I haven't always felt that way. I don't know about other people, but that's the greatest gift to me.
Yeah, oh, that's beautifully put. And you're definitely not the only one, as you know. Yeah, I
I'm
think
glad.
that's why.
I'm glad too. I wouldn't want to be the only one.
And I just find it so interesting because you've just shared how when you understand the fact that we're all creating our own little realities around everything that we see and that we do, that's not just fluffy, that you create your own world. It's literally based on atoms and particles and how things are created, from a scientific point of view. And when you say scientific point of view, it just means understanding how things work. And what I loved from what you were saying is that, once you start to understand that, it puts you in a different space completely. It's not just like you're kind of tweaking what you do. It's literally being in the world in a completely different way. And something I wanted to ask you, Greg, I'll be completely honest with you. When I was reading the book, I found myself, one of the tools that you share is starting to tell a different story about things to change the beliefs, so that your beliefs start to align with where you'd like to go. And you share a simple process of, first of all, noticing what your belief is about something. If you feel scared or worried or you have some kind of signal that you have a belief that's out of kilter, something that, if you would like to create an amazing relationship, but then when you think about relationships, you get this weird feeling, that's a signal that your beliefs aren't in alignment with that. So you share this idea of, well, in your head, you can start to tell yourself a different story. Like, for example, I know that right now I have this weird feeling about relationships, but I know that if I learn to tell better stories about relationships, that over time I can start to experience a different, different relationships or better relationships in my life. And when I read this, I actually thought, wow, that's really wordy. How am I ever going to remember all of that? How am I going to start saying things like this? And
I'll try to be more succinct from now on. Sorry, Sven.
No, let me just, it gets better because then I thought, well, hang on, I want to try this. And so I started to actually do it. And I found that actually I liked the stories, and it really works because there was something that was on my mind at that time when I was reading the book, and every time I felt that familiar feeling of worry or this kind of it would just come across my mind, and I would feel, my shoulders tighten, and our body tells us what's going on in our soul, and I always feel it very in my shoulder area, neck area.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, okay, I remembered your tool, and I said, okay, I know that right now this is worrying me, but I know that if I start noticing this, start telling myself better stories about it, it will gradually improve. The next time that same feeling came back, it wasn't as strong. And that was literally after doing it once. And I've been doing it now for about 6 weeks. And I'm definitely noticing a change. Like things that had been almost like the loops of thought patterns are starting to, I can feel them, they're weaker and they're not coming back as often, not as strong. And so I wanted to ask you, just for our viewers, what do you do, Greg? Let's say, for example, there's, let's say that you wanted to create, I'm not really into cars, but for some reason I just feel like using this as an example. You'd like to create a Lamborghini. You'd like to have a Lamborghini car, an Italian sports car. Yeah, Matrix style with the doors that go up on the side, almost like in what's that film with the five?
Back to the Future.
Yeah, I've been thinking of the one with Mila Jokovic with the cars that fly. Let's say you want to create a car like that, but when you think about it, you have this weird feeling like, well, yeah, who are you, Greg, to have this car? Or this is what I would feel, as if I can create, $400,000 or whatever it is to have that. How would you use this idea of, okay, I understand now that I create what I see around me, that it's connected to me, even if I can't physically see the connection. I understand that the way I think about that thing will affect how it actually appears. So now what can people do to change their story? And I know this is covered a lot in the book, so I really recommend you guys watching that you go and buy it. You can get a Kindle version. That's what I have.
Sure.
Because I'm traveling. But we'll come back to that at the end. But just really quickly, and then I'll let you go after this. What would you do in that instant, Greg? What would be an example of a story you would do?
Do you mind if I switch the thing that I was desiring?
Sure. Yeah.
Because then I can give you a real life example from this past weekend. Okay. And by the way, you said a mouthful. And you know what, Sandy? You are so insightful, so in tune. Please accept the compliments. You kept saying a better story, because the real key, and I want to come back to this if we have time, it's not about telling a good story, okay? Now, if we can tell a good story, wonderful, fantastic. A good story is amazing, and it feels great. But it's not about telling a good story when that's not the authentic story, okay? It's about, as you said it, it's about telling a better feeling, and believable story. And I want to illustrate that, because you said, what do I do? Well, my wife and I are going to my third favorite city. Okay, it's tied for my second favorite city in America, is Charleston, South Carolina. Now, if you ever come to South Carolina, Charleston is it's an amazing town. It's so cool, and we are trying to, right now, we're in the initial planning stages. We were having a discussion this weekend, because this purchase might be 5 or 7 years from now. Okay, we're not talking about next week. And we were having a discussion, do we want to purchase a home in the historic district, or do we want to purchase a home in one of the outlying communities that's a beach community, but yet is still close to historic Charleston? And during that discussion, I noticed some feelings. They were fear, anger, disappointment. And as they came up, I realized here's what I felt or became aware of. Feelings of, you know what, Greg, you're not in a financial place where you can afford to do this today. What's wrong with you? Why haven't you been more successful? I bet that this isn't going to happen. I bet you're not worthy of having the resources to make this happen. Now, I'm sure that those types of feelings are not unfamiliar to people who are listening and watching. We all feel things like that from time to time.
Absolutely.
I definitely have a desire to have a home in Charleston with my wife. And those are definitely my feelings, or certainly part of my feelings about having a home in Charleston, which tells me that my beliefs about having a home in Charleston are not aligned with my desires for having, and that's okay. This isn't about, and so I'm describing the process. I'm trying to be as detailed as possible. If someone wants to listen and say, okay, well, how does this work? When I notice that, I don't beat myself up. What's wrong with you? Why are you Here's what I do. I say, oh, wow, that I'm feeling these feelings. I'm getting this feedback because I'm focusing on this desire, and here's the feedback loop, and that says to me, oh yeah, my beliefs aren't aligned yet. Okay? So I want to be honest and acknowledge, you know what? That is how I feel. I don't believe that anyone should say, I don't really feel that way. I know I can do this. Well, there's nothing wrong with saying I know I can do this if that's how I really feel. But when those feelings are there and we push them to the side and say, I'm going for the positive thought, I'm going for the positive affirmation, that's when we divorce ourselves from our creative power. Which sounds weird because you say, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. You're telling me that acknowledging negative, unpleasant things and not jumping into the positive is divorcing me from my creative power? Yeah, it is, because that information is really important information. And so here's the way it works for me. I notice it and I say, wow, I really do feel that way right now. And I'm going to acknowledge that I feel that way. And it's not pleasant. I don't enjoy feeling that way. And at the same time, I'm also going to acknowledge that while those feelings are very real for me right now, I also know that if I simply continue to intentionally raise my beliefs about this desire, I will, step by step, see a different universe. I will create different material experiences because I know that my material experiences are reflections of my beliefs, not reflections of me, but my beliefs. And so the reflection I'm experiencing right now is merely a reflection of the beliefs I currently have. Well, the beliefs I currently have are they're subjective. They're not written in stone. They're not the way it is. They're simply what I was given, and now I'm becoming aware of them. And now I can intentionally grow them in a believable manner. Now, you might say, Sandy, oh, give me a break, Greg. Are you kidding me? Like, you would really go through all that kind of discourse in your head? I mean, I'm not doing that. Well, you know what? Yeah, I do. I really do. Because what's the alternative? Once again, we're going to tell a story about every single thing. I was already telling a story about that desire. I personally would rather, take control of that story. And taking control of the story, by the way, you see, I want to point out that what I described, I was acknowledging how I really felt. I wasn't whitewashing it or sugarcoating it. I acknowledged that I did have those feelings, and they weren't pleasant, and they were real. And I also told myself a very believable, positive message and it didn't say, oh, I know I'm going to achieve these things. It's just a matter of time. What I said was, I know that if I raise my beliefs, my material experiences will change because the reflections will change. So all I need to focus on is raising my beliefs. So my message to myself, my story to myself, was believable. And it was better feeling, not good feeling, right? Because before I was intentional about the creation of my individual universe, I would have felt those feelings and just thought, yeah, I'm a loser. That's not going to happen. It's okay for me to think that. It's okay for me to tell that story. I don't want to tell that story, though. For me, the litmus test for anything, any story I'm telling, is, does this story serve me? Not, is this the story everyone else would tell? Is this the story I'm allowed to tell? Is it okay for me to tell this story? Would you approve of this story, Sandy? I mean, those can all be important things, but the real foundation is, does this story serve me? And if it doesn't, then I want to figure out a better feeling, believable one to tell, right? And saying, I'm a loser, I suck, I can't do things, this never works out for me, people don't like me, people eventually leave me. I mean, all those things, which we've probably all said things like that to ourselves from time to time, those stories don't serve me. So better feeling and believable by acknowledging how I really feel and by not jumping to the pie in the sky positive affirmation promises, because that's not believable. And we can get into that in a minute as to why it's important to make it believable, because it has to do with our subconscious brain. And I can illustrate that. Our dog Sam is laying asleep on the floor next to me right now. That's her favorite thing to do, by the way. Sleep.
Oh, that's funny. Mine is Chico. He's doing the same things. Yeah.
Oh, they're in sync. They're in coherence with each other.
Yeah.
See, if you've never, for people who've never had a dog, Sandy, you can back me up here. When you get a dog, the dog does not know how to walk on a leash. I mean, as a puppy, doesn't know how to walk on a leash, doesn't know how to not poop in the house, doesn't know all the rules, right? You have to train it. Well, I don't know about you. I tried to train Sam using a PowerPoint presentation. I brought her into the living room and I sat her down, and I turned on my projector and I said, "Okay, Sam, we're going to learn today how to walk on a leash, and I'm going to show here. See these 3 bullet points? They describe to you the reasons why walking on a leash is important, and on this next slide, you'll see the benefits of it." Now, I'm sure that that's appealing to you. I'm sure you can understand why this is a good thing for us. And now let's go outside and walk on a leash together. Well, Sandy and everyone else who's listening, you know that doesn't work, right? Because a dog doesn't learn that way, correct? Well, positive affirmations, good feeling stories all the time, only positive thought, that's like talking to our subconscious using a PowerPoint presentation with a dog. Our subconscious brain does not learn with logical, sequential, conscious thought. Our subconscious brain communicates with emotions and consequences. So we have to be always very, very careful and intentional about speaking to it. Just like when we train a dog, we exchange information with the dog in a way the dog will understand and benefit from. We do the same thing with our subconscious brain. And that's a big part of what the book teaches, and that's a big part of what often goes awry, if you will, with law of attraction. Because, hey, people can tend to be focused on, well, let me feel good all the time, and let me focus on the positive, and let me only have positive thought. And there's nothing wrong with positive thought, Sandy. There's nothing wrong with positive affirmations. There's certainly nothing wrong with feeling good. I love feeling good. The only time it becomes an issue is when I'm trying to apply anything in my life that's causing me pain and or especially suffering is a very clear signal that I've got beliefs that are pretty far out of alignment with my desires. And positive thought applied to that doesn't work because our subconscious brain shuts down. It says, whoa, I know you don't believe that. I'm going to protect the beliefs you currently have. I'm going to allow that positive affirmation to make you feel good in the moment, but you're not changing this, right? When we use it in those circumstances, it's the same silly thing as clicking on a PowerPoint and trying to teach a dog how to do something. It just, our subconscious brain doesn't learn that way.
I think that's one of the best descriptions of how the subconscious mind works I've ever heard. I know I'm going to make a video about that because I love that analogy. That's just perfect.
Yeah. I think about it all the time too, Sandy. Anytime I start lecturing my subconscious brain, like, come on, believe in abundance.
Yeah.
You know we believe in abundance.
Yeah.
I start getting this image of a dog sitting there going, what's he talking about? What is it? I don't understand anything he's saying. Because that's exactly what our subconscious brain does. It has to be spoken to in a believable way, which, as you know, really involves, it's very important to acknowledge how we really feel, to make the messages believable to our subconscious brain.
Exactly, and actually there's an example you share in the book, which I'll just quickly share because I think it will help people watching get this, and we've got, numbers are going up and up as we do this hangout, which is a good sign.
Hello, everybody.
If you have questions, guys, give them to me now because we're going to be wrapping up soon. So otherwise it'll be too late. So.
Sandy, before you go, how much longer do we have? Just so I know I don't go off on some tangent and take up the rest of the time.
Well, it's up to you really. I mean, I'm.
Well, I have to be at work at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So could we just?
I should say only another 6 hours, I think.
Sandy, I know people tell you this all the time. Your energy, I love meeting people, and I love opportunities to create great versions of people, and I really appreciate your energy and your enthusiasm and your insight too. You have a lot of understanding of how to be fulfilled and abundant. And it comes through in not only what you say, but in how you're presented in general. And this has been a lot of fun talking to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, for me too. I'm just I've got all these ideas popping off in my head, like popcorn kernels.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That's the currency. The currency of a creative mind is ideas. And aren't you blessed to have that? And aren't we all blessed to have the opportunity to have that?
Exactly. It's like inspiration is what makes my ideas flow. I notice that if I'm not putting in useful or inspiring material into my mind or through my ears, then I can definitely notice a difference. So that's why I think a lot of people could be just watching TV right now or zoning out, but the people you guys here watching this hangout, you're making a different choice because you know that the stories you tell about things create those things, and by filling your mind, your awareness with consciousness, with what you've been sharing with us today, this is vibration changing consciousness. Yeah. Try saying that in a hurry. It helps everything flow better. And I loved actually in the book you shared the example of changing your habits with fruits and how you had used what you just shared with us with this example of Charleston and the house in Charleston. The example you gave with the fruit, that came back to me over and over of all the examples you shared in the book because it was just a really simple story, but it just really beautifully illustrates how this works. And for those of you who haven't read the book yet, I think you should all go and read it now. You shared, and I'll just paraphrase it quickly here, but you shared, Greg, how you had wanted to change your breakfast habits, how you used to love to eat pancakes and sweet things, and you decided that you wanted to eat fruit in the morning. And so you realized that, using the, yeah, everything's great, positive affirmation method would have been like, yeah, I love to eat fruit. Fruit is amazing. I love to eat fruit as soon as I wake up, and you realize that that was so far from how you actually felt about eating fruit that it just wouldn't have been believable to your subconscious. It would have been that PowerPoint again going,
Yeah.
this is why you should
Yeah.
love to eat fruit, and the dog going, what? So what you did is you started to tell yourself, okay, today I'm going to choose fruit, but tomorrow I'll give myself the choice of choosing something else, and I'll just eat fruit for today. And then after a few days of doing that each morning, you started to change the story a little bit and say, okay, well now you noticed you were starting to enjoy the fruit more. So then you were saying, now I start to, I can't remember exactly, but now I'm starting to enjoy this fruit, and I can feel how good my body's feeling, and I'm going to look forward to the fruit tomorrow. And that you changed the story progressively as the weeks went by, to the point where you shared by the end of that process, you were actually genuinely looking forward to fruit and the changing seasons, the new fruits that were coming out. And I sound like a Hollywood trailer. But I love that example because it's a very simple one, you know, changing the way you think about fruit. But it just illustrates how it's a process. You know, if you read the book or watch this interview and then feel weird because nothing's changed within 24 hours, then, you know, understand that it doesn't happen overnight. And this is what I noticed from starting to use the same tool, was that each time I would feel slightly different. And each time that was like a victory for me personally, because I was like, oh yeah, I don't feel as worried about that anymore. And you know, it becomes a game, like you said. It becomes fun because you're like, okay, you feel like an alchemist. You're just starting to change how things affect you and how you affect them.
Another, you know, another metaphor that I like to use, describing what you're talking about. You know, that eyeball science we were talking about earlier, and the ways. And by the way, you know, operating with some of the lesser effective paradigms or the lesser effective reasons we do things the way we do them, you know, our eyeball science. Hey, that's completely natural. Who wouldn't base her decisions upon the material experiences that, you know, she has with her basic senses? I mean, that's you're not foolish for doing that. The old paradigm, the old way of doing things. Let's say I want to grow a mustache. Now, this is probably a desire that only the men will have. Probably not a lot of women will want to grow a mustache, so may have to think of something different for yourself. Then you have beautiful white teeth. Maybe I want to whiten my teeth. I don't know. But let's say I want to grow a mustache, all right? So the old science, if I'm using the old science, what I do is I go into my bathroom, I bring a black Sharpie, I look at the mirror, and I hold my head perfectly still, and then I draw a mustache on my reflection. And then I'm done, and I say, yes, great looking mustache, I'm really pleased. And then I turn and move, and I do something, and I look back, and where'd the mustache go? Where'd the mustache go? Well, that's kind of, we all say, well, that's ridiculous, Greg. I mean, the mustache, you grow the mustache. Exactly, okay? Our material experiences work the same way, right? Most of us, we say, where's the mustache? Where's the mustache? Where's the mustache? Although it's, where's the soulmate? Where's the money? Where's the job? Where's the world peace? Where's the efficacy? Where's the healthy body? And we're looking in the mirror, saying, I know I drew it on the mirror somewhere. Where is it? That's all a reflection. And the source of that reflection isn't Sandy, okay? Sandy is not her beliefs. Sandy is a time-space event. Sandy is energy having a material experience. And energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change forms. So Sandy has always been here. Sandy will always be here. However, Sandy is in this moment, in this time space, having this experience of being a flesh and blood human being. Awesome. Congratulations, Sandy. You've done it. You're a human being. And so have I, and so has all of us who are listening. We're all getting this opportunity. What a fantastic opportunity. We're all manifesting beautiful things like an immune system that works 24/7, heart that beats and pumps oxygen-rich blood through our body, lungs that take in oxygen and keep us alive, digestive systems that, or a digestive system that where we can eat food and then it turns it into energy. I mean, I don't know about you, I never put any conscious thought into any of those activities. I take them for granted. There's still things I'm manifesting. There's still examples of reflections of beliefs that are perfectly aligned with my desires. Now, sometimes those reflections aren't pleasing. I might, look at my belly. That's not pleasing. And I get that. And in fact, I have experienced that. And that's what led me to write that first book. All the while, when we remain trapped, and when I use the word trapped, I don't want to be accusatory by using a term like that, because I'm not pointing a finger at anyone. I'm only saying trapped because there's an alternative. But when I remain trapped in the illusory world of my eyeballs and eyeball science, I say, wow, look at that fat around my belly. That displeases me. I want it gone. I got to monkey with that mirror. I got to reach out with my Sharpie and start changing that darn mirror. Right? No, that's nonsense. We know that. But I'm telling you, that metaphor should be applied to everything, our body, everything. We start with the source of the reflection, our beliefs. And now that doesn't mean that we'll never take action. It doesn't mean I'm not going to, exercise my body or eat foods that I feel are healthy and make me feel good. Well, of course action's always going to be important. But when we start with the source of the reflection, the beliefs, the actions we take are inspired and enlightened and are ways that the quantum field or the energy of the universe is using to connect the dots for us and bring about the spontaneous manifestation, the spontaneous reflection of our beliefs in our material experiences, because that's exactly what the quantum field does every second of every day. It reflects our beliefs back to us. Every version of everything we see, is a reflection of our beliefs. And my dog Sam, I love Sam. She's great. I even love her, dog smell. Maybe I'm weird. I love her dog smell. My wife says that it's stinky. Now, my wife and I are seeing two different universes. Who's right, who's wrong? Now, Sam has an odor, right? In my universe, it's a beautiful odor. In my wife's universe, it's not a very pleasant odor. Is she right and I'm wrong? Am I right and she's wrong? You know the answer to that. We're both right. However, just remember, if you want to do this, you can take that same principle and apply it to everything. And it's accurate, and it's real, and it will work. Your version that you're creating, if you find yourself being displeased by the version of anything you're creating, you can step back and go, wait a minute, why am I creating this? This version is not pleasing me, but I'm sitting here creating it. And I'm not suggesting that we have to be okay with everything. I'm not suggesting everything has to be good. We're not going to feel good about everything, and we're not going to feel okay about everything. I'm gonna bring us back to that litmus test. Is this serving me? Not, is this fair? Is this just? Is this right? Is this what everyone would expect of me? Is this serving me? And if it's not, why wouldn't I want to intentionally create a version of something that does serve me? You know, Eh, Sandy, I know it's coming up on 4:30 here in Louisville, Kentucky. We've been on the line for an hour and a half. We probably should start to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes or so. I'd be happy to come back on if you find that it would be fun to talk more. Please invite
Yeah.
me. It's fun talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Well, thank you so much, Greg, because I just know, I can feel, not just know, that people have had some aha moments from listening to you, because it's we actually sort of did full circle by coming back to, the structural stuff, why this actually matters, why
Right.
changing the way that you think about fruit, or how the PowerPoint talks to the dog, all of that, why that actually affects the things that we live. You've just explained that really perfectly. So thank you so much for your time. And I just want to ask you I have
Sure.
a question I like to ask people. It's kind of a bit off the topic. Don't worry, it's not, super weird or anything. But I love to know, actually, you already answered one of them. One was, what's one change you would like to see in the world, Greg? And you said earlier you'd like to see suffering become optional for people.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's a really great way of describing it. And my other question is, what's one of the kindest things that anyone has done for you on our planet till now? If there's anything that comes to mind, I just like finding out about these things.
Those are great questions. I want to tell you this. Anytime someone says, I want to ask you a question, you know what it reminds me of? When I was in grade school and I would get a crush on a girl, I remember I would used to write on a note, "Do you like me? Yes or no?" And then underneath it I would write circle 1. And then and you know what she always you know what I always got back? Maybe.
Oh no.
That's not fair. Maybe.
About it.
Come on.
See, that brought back
Maybe.
unpleasant flashback.
What were those young girls thinking at that time? I just that was so disappointing. You know what? My greatest desire is that suffering becomes optional. And you had said, your activism in your past, which, my goodness, any way that we put ourselves forth to make a positive impact on the world is a beautiful thing to do. In my latest book, I have a chapter that delves into the question of why bad things happen to good people and what we can do about it. Because I think that's a really important question, especially when somebody hears these ideas and they say, okay, well, that's great, Greg. You're saying I can create versions that are more pleasing to me of these things. Well, what about the person in Appalachia, or what about the person in Uganda, or what about, subjugated people and victims and things like that? And what I would say is that it's important for us to know that our beliefs are contributed to communal beliefs. Our energy is contributed to communal energy. And so I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Sandy, but I think you may have been alluding to this earlier. The way I say it is, when I'm doing something altruistic or beneficial, and I'm doing it while I also say this thing's never going to go away, or this problem's never going to go away. Like if I helped build a house for Habitat for Humanity last year, and when I did that, I made sure to the best of my ability that the entire time I was engaged in that effort, that I said to myself, remember, a better feeling, believable story. I wanted to be honest. I said to myself, it's hard for me to really envision that the world could exist without poverty, and without subjugation, and without suffering. I don't enjoy that. in any way, shape, or form. And I'm going to be honest and say it's difficult for me to envision a world without those things. I want to say that as I engage and send my energy into this altruistic effort, which is given with love, I want to do it while at the same time acknowledging that the possibility exists that anything can happen and that our world can change. Even if it's hard for me to envision it changing, it can. The potential, the possibility exists, and that's enough for me. If that's as positive as I can go, because Sandy, I want to be frank. For me to say I don't believe, I believe that poverty could be wiped off the planet. Honestly, I don't know if I said that. I don't think that I really believe that. I would like to believe that, but I'm not there yet. What I can say is I can believe that suffering can become optional. And the reason I'm going into all this is to say that anytime, if we play Grow Greater You, if we intentionally create a version of if we can intentionally create a universe that's more pleasing to us, we're going to do it by growing our beliefs. And if we do that, you know what? Each one of us will be contributing energy to the universe, to the world, to the communal and the collective beliefs and energy. And so when Sandy does that, when you got up today, Sandy, and you decided to grow in enlightened ways, you were adding energy to a collective energy. And your contribution is vital. Now, is your contribution going to change the world in and of itself? All by itself? Perhaps not. But I'll say this. Is anyone else capable of making your contribution but you? No. And if that's true, and it is, no one can make my contribution except me, how more important could I be? How more important could my contribution be? I don't think that it's possible for it to be more important. And that is true for each and every single human being. Whether what I'm doing, and I do believe it's important to empower our neighborhoods, our communities, our countries, our planet. And I believe that it is possible that we will continue to grow in enlightened ways and create a life that is more that is infused with the ability to serve, and that gives options to make suffering something that someone can decide to opt out of, to have choices, So the kindest thing anyone ever did to me? I think the kindest thing anyone ever did to me is drop me into the energy ocean and say, when I was a victim, when I thought I was a victim, okay, a victim of life, and that I couldn't do anything about it, drop me in the energy ocean and say, sink or swim. At the time, it was the cruelest thing I could imagine. But you know what? Looking back on it, what a wonderful gift that was. I'm actually grateful for that. And I'm saying that not to grandstand or try to be deep and philosophical. I'm saying that to say, isn't it interesting how perspectives can change over the course of time? That sometimes the things that we thought were our greatest tragedies turn out to be our most wonderful blessings. And we've all had that experience. Well, quantum physics tells us that when we play Grow Greater You, we can actually intentionally shorten that time frame between experience and blessing. We learn to be honest, we learn to tell better feeling stories, we learn to make them believable, and we learn to intentionally grow our beliefs. And we can continue this conversation. If you want to talk again, just let me know. I loved talking to you. I hope people tuned in. Please go to my website, whyquantumphysicist.com. Let me know. I mean, send me an email. I love hearing from people. I do my very best to answer back. I can't always. Sometimes I'm busy going here and there. But Sandy, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Greg. And I'll actually I put a link to your website in the blog that I posted out to people on my email list and on social media. But if you're catching this on Google, I'll put it in the description. But whyquantumphysicist.com, isn't it, Greg?
Yes, whyquantumphysicist.com.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. If I was American, I would say awesome. And I just want to say, I just loved what you shared now quickly about I can't alone, change the world, but no one else can play my part. I have never heard it described like that. That just gave me a huge ding.
Isn't it wonderful to be so important? Sandy, you couldn't be more important. You really couldn't.
Yeah.
You couldn't be more beautiful. You couldn't be more lovely. You couldn't be more important. And that really is true. And oh my gosh, if I had one wish, if a genie came down here and said, Greg, you have one wish. Let's let everybody feel that way about herself and himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Think how gorgeous the world would be, Yeah. But we can do that. We can make our contribution and try to help that occur,
Exactly.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. We can,
what a nice life,
And if everyone's doing that, then that collective and consciousnness that you talked about before, that would start to shift even more. So, yeah. Vamos, as they say in Spanish. So thank you so much for your time, for coming on and for answering my questions, and our audiences as well. And you can catch Greg at his blog. You also have a YouTube channel. I'll put the link to that too. And find your books on Amazon. That's where I got them, on Kindle. But obviously there's paper copies, hardback copies. So the one that I was talking about in the beginning, just for people who didn't get the title yet, was Why Quantum Physicists Do Not Fail. But there's actually a whole series of them. So once again, Greg, thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for being here as well. Is there anything you want to say quickly before we turn off the broadcast?
Me?
Yeah, you.
I've been talking the whole time, Sandy. I want to say, honestly, thank you. If at any point that I have been of value to you, thank you, because you made that decision. You conferred that upon me, and there's no greater gift you could give me, and I'm incredibly honored. And I love the opportunity. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Sandy, to allow people to make that decision.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, it's been fun. So, and it's so funny, we talked about dogs a lot, and my dog he can sense intuitively when I'm coming to the end of a hangout, because he's getting more of an agitated.
He wants to walk.
Yeah, exactly.
Show him a PowerPoint, okay?
Yeah. He's literally whining, and he does this every time I do.
Oh, those dogs. They'll get you.
So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Greg, for being here, and let's go out and tell better stories about all the things we'd like to see in the world and in our lives. Bye, everyone.